Struggling with that post-Reformation.
The life is good.
Welcome to Fallout Podcast episode 60-something. It's a Fallout special with all kinds of shenanigans. Tonight we are looking at era 2003 to 2008, which contains the following albums. Real New Fall LP, formerly known as Country on the Click, Fall Heads Roll, a Reformation Post-TLC, and Imperial Wax Solvent, joined by Pip and the Walker, but not Sage, because he's on his work to do. No Sage. How's Pip?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. It's I was trying to work out what the difference between reflecting and genuflecting is. Whichever one I was doing, one of the albums that we're going to be reviewing today. It surprised me how consistent it's been.
Well, genuflecting would be to kneel and give praise to something, and so
when Neil does it.
Exactly. He's not here tonight. What about Alistair? How is he?
What about him?
Exactly. Shipman, indeed. And the story.
I've been singing that all week. That is weird. I was singing that for some reason. That song is stuck in my head all week.
Any song or phrase that someone says to me, it's like the part life thing, isn't it? But this is Shipman. Every time somebody says a phrase, it just a shit man after it. The story so far: 4 friends form band post Pistols gig. Friel, Brammer, Baines, Smith, M. Then Baines out, Riley in, Paulett in, Burns in and out, Witch Trials, Shanley, Scanlon, Dragnet, P. Hanley in, Slates, Hexenauer, 2 drummers, Undilutable Slang Truth, Riley out! Exclamation mark. Perverted, Bricks, E. Smith in, Wonderful and Frightening, Lecky on the boards, Professional Panpiper, Simon Rogers in, the Poop era begins, TNSG, not that good, says Fallout Podcast, Funky Psy in, The Curse of Ben Sinister, Future Pain Doctor, Marsha Schofield in, Orange Ballet, Clark, Friends, UK Top 20, Seminal, the worst piece of shit I ever been involved in, says Pain Doctor, Bricks out, the 90s, Major Label, Extricate, Brammer is back, Sequences, Fiddles, Craig Leon, Marsha out, Brammer out, Shift Work, The Bush Era, Computers, Code Selfish, dropped, Top 10 LP, MCR, Burns is back, Bricks is back, Scanlan is chiseled, Nagel in, Light User, hurrah, Bricks quits for good, boo, Levitate, The Fight, Arrest, Abuse, Things Fall Apart, The Midpoint of No Return, Shanley out, Burns out for good, boo, End of an Era, Part 2, Marshall, Wilding, Unutterable, Blaney in, Are You Our Missing Winner, Broke Fall, Watts, Pritchard, Burt Whistle, Future TLCs, and now the Eleni era begins. Dun, dun, dun.
Oh, that was awesome.
Oh, well, it's all true.
What a ride it's fucking been.
So we start off with Country on the Click, which Fall fans know is Country on the Click, but the rest of the world known as the Real New Fall LP, formerly Country on the Click, 2003. Let's have a listen to a selection of tracks from that record.
Every week. Give me the controls. Give me
the controls for Heart of Pip.
Amateurs.
Watching out. You have to shave first. Female. Where do you stand? Agree on. Trees blocking the water flowing.
record. So, released in 2003, recorded at Gracielands in Rochdale. Post-punk, says Wikipedia. Produced by Showbiz and Smith. Lineup: Ben Pritchard, Jim Watts, Dave Milner, Elena Polu, Marky Smith. It's the first one that has Eleni on it, and then the core lads that would go on to be the TLCs, sort of. Yeah. What's your take on this record, Pip?
Just flicking through the album, then it's so strong. This album, there's so many songs that really knock it out of the park. It's quite a testament to the band. Pull out an album this strong really is so late into the band's career, and so many of these songs have really been hooked in my head this week as well. I was laughing before about Shit Man being the one that kind of lodged in my brain, but as I was playing through them songs, then I was thinking I hummed every single one of these songs at some point this week when the record has not been played. It's so hook heavy as an album that it would be a great first album to introduce somebody to the Fall. I think it's incredibly accessible, but doesn't seem to lose any of the Fall energy about it all. I think incredibly strong showing. I think Mark's on really good form performance-wise, but also the songs are really, really great songs. There's some real treats on this album, isn't there? I mean, the obvious one I think for me would be Janet, Johnny and Jane, but the rock stuff's great. There's some really heavy tunes on it that pull the weight. And do you know what? I've listened to Mike's Love Hexagon as well several times this week, more than I needed to. That is just such a solid tune. So yeah, I've got a big, big soft spot for this album anywhere. And I think that out of these four, this is probably one that I've enjoyed listening to the most, really. So yeah, big thumbs up.
I agree. So 23rd studio album. Some of that is explained by the fact that the tracks were originally scheduled for release under the title Country in the Click, but Smith was unhappy with the mix and basically complained. I'm guessing he complained about Grant Showbiz's stuff, but I don't know who. This LP was perfect in March, but then you trust people who shall remain nameless to go away, and it comes by sounding like Doctor Who meets Posh Spice. You have to go back and strip it down to basically what it was.
I don't know what that means. Doctor Who comes with Posh Spice.
Well, here's the interesting thing, right? So the full version of Country on the Click is on YouTube, so you can listen to the versions he's talking about, and they are a little bit more psychedelic. I don't get the Posh Spice. I reckon he's talking like a pop sheen, which I don't know if I see that, but I get the Doctor Who psychedelic kind of vibe a little bit more if you listen. And that same thing actually happens later when you listen to the Britannia Row ones that Grant Showbiz mixed. And I think it's the same thing. I think basically in both those instances, Grant Showbiz or someone mixed them and Smith just came in and said, nah, take all that off and just make it meat and potatoes. But the fact is that this album is unique because of the deft touches and the weirdness, and the pub rock kind of stuff hasn't lodged itself in there yet. It's in a little bit, but from the next album on, it's really there.
It sounds a bit like the BFAT experience with was it Strictly Personal one with Beetle Bones, where like BFAT really wasn't happy with the recording of it. Some of it is actually okay on that, like, but I can completely get his point where they're like putting phase effects on drums and stuff like that. So you can kill something with production very easily. Like, and it's like the Albini thing about getting a band to sound, how it sounds in the room rather than how it sounds in a $2,000 a day studio. Fair play to him for that.
I think so. In getting that, the actual sound, like Albini will say, like, if you're a shit band and you sound shit, I'm not going to do anything about that. I'm going to record you as you sound, and that's what I do. That's my style. And other producers do bring in their own signature sound that bands might want, but no, it seems like Smith was of the Albini kind of camp, which is why it's such a tragedy that he never got to produce those 4 albums that would have been brilliant for the 10 minutes that Smith was able to work with him before he stormed out and sacked him and went back to Pete Waterman.
Big Black Girl was shit.
Here's what Ezra says.
Real new fall LP. Here the fall blossomed into the imperial phase of their autumnal majesty. Real new fall reminds me of this nation's saving grace, a collection of tightly honed bangers. There may be a lack of the kind of classics that stand head and shoulders above most of the discography, but each and every track plays its part to perfection. The album has a kind of south of the border cowboy sci-fi vibe, like Morricone murmuring from a shallow grave just off the drive to one of the more loosey-goosey Ayahuasca Vomariums. Seems like Showbiz and maybe Watts played a central role in some of the technological aspects. Showbiz's original vision was of a fall drenched in synth tones and psychedelic puke. I expected I would hate it, but it's actually pretty good. Smith's preferred mix is the one I'd plump for. However, there's a history of that all the way through. McCartney went back and did Let It Be Naked, right? And there's a mix of one of the Stooges albums, right? That was it Bowie who mixed it, and Iggy Pop eventually went back. What do you think of Real New Fall LP?
Well, you kind of like mentioned, well, we've been talking about the production, and it's bloody great. I think it's one of the best sounding fall LPs out there. As it's been said before, all the songs there like very, very strong. I thought the opening song, though, Green Eye Loco Man's a pretty weak song, really. It's probably the weakest one on it, and just to put it first is it's a bit of a mad decision, like, but it gets it over with quick, doesn't it? Sparta FC is absolute cracker. Like, I was surprised, like, when we covered it on the podcast last time, that none of you seemed to know that it was used for like the BBC football scores thing. Every Saturday they used to be playing it, and that's why they got Smith doing the reading the results. And considering the content of the song, the lyrical content and what it's about, it's a very, very interesting choice for like family tea time. Watch the football results come in, like Chelsea FC fans. This is your last day.
We live on blood.
Yeah, beautiful stuff. But you got like some glam rocky sounding stuff in there, like Mountain Energy. Mike loves Zexagon as well. Some lovely like discordant guitar all the way through it. It's really varied because you got like the Janet, Johnny and James, which sounds like golden brown, but in a more folky slant to it, and like it's sped up a little bit, which it completely sounds different from likes of Sparta. It was Portugal on there as well.
Bonus track. So I think it came out in the States with a slightly different lineup, and Portugal's on the American version, which interestingly, part of the cover was drawn by John Dwyer from the OCs, which I found out this week. But the American version has Mad Mark Goth and Portugal on it, which Portugal's brilliant. Yeah, he definitely should have been on the original.
Yeah, lots of really strong ones on there. Contraflow, lovely, tonal guitar on there. Even the Hazelwood cover's okay, like for a cover. So that that's a pretty good press for me.
Yeah, in context, it works. And I actually agree with you that Green Eyed Loco Man is my least favourite, and it's the one that's most pub rocky. I think from Mountain Energy onwards, absolutely. I think it's probably my favourite album to listen to back to front. Stick Portugal on there and cover it instead of Green Eyed Loco Man, and I'm calling it.
Fair play, Brendan.
Here's something you might not know, Al. The theme from IOC from 2005 onwards was used as the theme music for Final Score, the BBC, when they read the football results. And then because of that, Smith was actually asked to read out the classified results. I'm surprised you didn't know that, Alice. Someone who...
No, you're shitting me, Brendan. You're pulling me tail.
Someone as a football fan. Here are some things that Wikipedia think are important. Alex Leonard of Pitchfork called it a valuable album as anything they Fall ever released in the 1990s. AllMusic's David Jeffries said, gives the faithful another reason to believe, while Andres Loco for The Expression was positive. Smith grinds and spits on everything, sometimes incomprehensible, sometimes insanely entertaining. And here is the thing, every time I always try and find, for the albums that we think are good, I try and find reviews that say it's terrible and vice versa. No negative reviews on anywhere, though, not on Metacritic, not on Amazon, not on Radio Music. Everybody said nice things. Is the only album so far that I could not find people shitting all over it, which is interesting. But what does Tim think?
Well, he's put that he was really surprised that we didn't know that from 2005 until about 2009, the song theme from Sparta FC was used in Final Score on the BBC's television on Saturday afternoon. Football score. And because of that, that's why they invited Mikey Smith to do the scores.
What, Mark Smith did the scores?
Yeah.
I can't believe we're still learning such valuable information at this point in the podcast.
Like I say, he was just very surprised we didn't know that already. He's put some other things as well. I think this was the most recently released Fall album when I first explored the music. And I got it early on and was absolutely blown away. This has got to be up there with the best of them. A complex and multifaceted sound, far more developed and thought thought through than most other Fall albums. Comparing it to Country on the Click, it makes me wish more of their albums were leaked so that they could have had to go back and work a bit more. For me, the final product is definitely preferable. The real highlights for me are the more obscure and nutty bits like Zero Theft, the Past Zexagon, Protein Protection and Recovery Kit. They all have their own world and hint at hidden things. Bloody brilliant shit.
Yes, and it's that light touch and the nutty stuff that sets it apart from some of the meatier stuff that was to follow in my mind, as well as just the songwriting. So here we go. I'll throw you a review. You tell me whether this is reasonable. For about half of the album, it sounds like it could be as good as any of the best albums from the Fall. Unfortunately, after about 4 songs, it falls off a cliff. The songs on the final version are too polished and sound rushed and hurried, and there's something lacking I just can't put my finger on. I generally give a new Fall album a listen for weeks on end, but I got tired of this one real quick. How about that, okay?
I think it's wrong. I would, if I was being charitable, I would say there are bits of arrangements on some of the songs where it feels a little bit, where perhaps that could have been worked a bit more, but nothing that distracts the album. There's certainly nothing boring on there. It's so I think on genuflection, that's wrong.
Fair enough. How about this, Al? I can hear the evidence of Pro Tools with the cut and paste mez everywhere, and that's a bit of a cop-out. Digressions in the technical stuff aside, Johnny, Jonathan James and things like that just don't work. I don't like the ones where he sings in a quieter voice. Maybe Midnight in Aspen, but the rest of them, he just can't quite find his voice on those kind of tracks.
Well, they say opinions are like arseholes, aren't they? And
that must be Fallhead's role, mustn't it? It's got Midnight in Aspen.
No, he's comparing it to that where it's the light singing.
Oh, right.
I think so.
Well, yeah, you can see why Smith used to give journalists such an hard time, can't you? Because they're so full of shit.
But don't you want to respond to the content of what this person has said rather than the abstract concept of bad reviews?
Well, it's not just that it's a bad review, it's just that it's like wrong, you know. Like, all right, yeah, Pro Tools. Everybody was bloody using Pro Tools. What are you complaining about there? Was that the one which said it fell off a cliff after the 4th song?
No, that was the first one that Phil was on. This one said Pro Tools ruined it and you can't sing over those quiet songs.
You can't. It's all part of the dynamic, though. It's, you know, you can have a bit of variety, or else it's all the same. It's boring. It's the variety that makes it interesting. And there's a hell of a lot of variety on here. Like if you look at the content on it, I mean, there's stuff that sort of like reminds me of Cam, the stuff that reminds me of Morricone, the stuff that reminds me of the Hives. There's a lot of stuff going on, and it's done very competently.
I agree. I think so, and I do think when he does his soft singing, it's perfect. It's beautiful. We've said this so many times. He can sing over anything. If you feel like his voice, fair enough. But if you've got any kind of liking for the Smith take on things, he nails pretty much any style of music that you give him.
Yeah, you either like it or you don't. There's no in between.
Mate, lad, let's have a listen to a bit of an interview before we move on. This is from the Tom Robinson interview in 2004. It's actually a very good interview. He digs Smith's, seems to like him because I think they go back a long way. Tom Robinson was like a rocking racism, punky kind of chap, right? So
did he Great to Be Gay guy? Did he?
Yeah.
Great to Be Gay sing?
2, 4, 6, 8 motorway.
That's right. I love that song.
Him as well.
Yeah.
Glad to be gay.
Yeah. I used to listen to his. Was it Radio 6? Did he used to have a show on? Probably still know.
This is the one from Radio 6, and essentially, yes, he really digs into some interesting stuff about Smith's love of reggae and stuff. So let's have a bit of a listen to this.
What you just heard there was The Fall. Mark, whenever we hear your lyrics and it talks about I, we never know if it's you or a character that you're assuming in the course of the songs. Mm-hmm. I mean, why do you put yourself into other people's shoes so much in the way you approach it?
I think that's important to do that in music.
It gives you a kind of much wider canvas you can choose from if you're not just telling your own Joni Mitchell stories about your life and your loves and everything.
That's right, yeah, I find that very boring. A lot of people do assume that it's me talking. You know.
Just because you say I?
Yeah.
But that can get you into trouble. I mean, someone like Randy Newman, when he's talking about good old boys or short people or whatever, they always assume that's Randy Newman talking. Or David Byrne talks about being a terrorist and this.
Most Fall fans seem a bit more intelligent than that. They seem to recognise that. A lot of it's wastage, isn't it? In music.
Yeah, we've talked about that stuff a bit before, right? Haven't we? Like, he's playing a character in a lot of his songs, but they're not. It's not always obvious. In some of them, obviously, but in others, it's a bit harder to work that out.
I think there's an element of plausible deniability with it, isn't there? Where he knows that he's playing fast and loose. That perhaps he can say things like a ventriloquist dummy can perhaps say things that the ventriloquist can't say.
Don't say that, Mark. No, you can't say that.
It wasn't me, it was a character. So I can understand why some people might find that frustrating, but I do think that is part and parcel of his charm. It's a very strangely postmodern bit, that, isn't it? Where for an artist who quite obviously revels in modernity and the tools of modernity to kind of play his trade, that in itself is a very postmodern thing. That tricksy, where does the irony start and finish kind of vibe to it. But I think you don't really get many artists nowadays doing that kind of putting a character on and singing from the perspective of somebody else. It's much more narcissistic music these days, isn't it? I think, and it's always been a bit of a fringe thing, but it used to happen more, I think. David Bowie's the obvious one, isn't he? Adopting characters and kind of, but he's so influenced by music theatre and his stuff anyway that you kind of expect it. And you do get it in hip hop from time to time, don't you? Who's the woman that I'm thinking? Is it Jonelle or something like that? She does quite conceptually based albums.
Is it Janelle Monáe?
Yeah, Janelle Monáe. That's what I was thinking of. Yeah. So there's and what's his face out of Outcast and that, you know. So there's characters, aren't there, that do that type of thing. But it's a more challenging form of art because you've got to put a lot more thought into it, because it's not just about coming up with words of music, it's world building as well, isn't it? And character and that. Yeah,
the fact that the I isn't you in it, and there's no explanation of that. That is an interesting kind of thing. And that kind of the end of modernism. Catch-22, where it's written from multiple perspectives and you're not really sure who's writing. I remember reading The Sound and the Fury once, and I think I had a bit of a fever at the same time, and I had to put it down because it starts from the perspective of a kid with a developmental disability, and you don't know that, and so you read in the first few pages and it doesn't make sense. Yeah, it doesn't make sense if you don't know that. And as soon as you realize that, I had to stop, and I read somewhere in between what it was, and I was like, okay, I can now it still didn't make a lot of sense, but I didn't think I was going mad the second time I read it. It's like, shall we move on to Fall Heads Roll? All right, so let's have a listen to Fall Heads Roll from 2005.
As we travel through Hidden Valley, right every way, you don't know what you're doing when you accuse me. You're talking about yourself. You think you're a giant, you think you're a nothing, hey, hey. Sons and daughters, pass the banjo, pass the banjo, pass the banjo, pass the banjo, pass the banjo. We can't sound made. I said, what about us? What about us? What about us? What about The fog sticks around as if he were on soul. Goes higher and higher. His verbals victorious and unjust, trembling in its telepathic, being hectic up by bounds. The watch was blackish in the morning. It was peculiar. The snow is all around.
All heads roll. Alternative rock, released on a Slogan label. I don't know anything about. Produced Smith, Simon Ding Archer, who then went on to be in the Pixies and Holly Harvey's band. Lineup: Smith, Pritchard, Trafford, Birtwistle, Pellew. So Jim Watts is out on bass and Steve Trafford's in, and these are the three that would very quickly ditch him mid-tour and become the infamous TLCs. 24th studio album. Blindness, Stuff About Shipment. Alex Petridis of The Guardian said, head-turning quality and the riffs that could strip paint. And Nick Reynolds said, the album's as erratic as Smith always is. Sometimes he's sharp as a needle. Sometimes he's incomprehensible. But what does Alistair think?
It's a good follow-up from Country on the Click. It's not quite as strong, but it's still got that variety there. You know, you've got like the Bordemics on there for your northern country and western kind of thing. Emphasis on the cunts. Been beautiful stuff. That sort of really kind of, makes me think of, was it that one that's like, okay, Midnight in Aspen. Yeah, it kind of like sounds like Gil Gilberto or something like that. Like a Tropicalia 1960s Brazilian thing. It's got without sounding cheesy, because it's so easy to just turn out some cliched nonsense if you're trying to write in a certain style. But if you're comparing it, you say it was 2004. This,
yeah, it was 2005. It came out, so about a year after.
Catching mind back to then and sort of like what was going around like with guitar bands and what they were churning out. It's a pretty strong LP because but I think it was at a time when guitar bands really started blanding out. I don't know if it was like a post-Oasis thing where it was just like bland is acceptable, and you had like bands like Travis and Coldplay and stuff like that, just making the grass growing sound interesting.
Biggest indie albums of 2005: Franz Ferdinand, The National, Gorillaz, Demon Days, Editors, The Hold Steady. Yeah, all of that kind of Springsteen-y shit. Although you'll know it's by Trail of the Dead and the Cribs were around at that point, and I always had a bit of a soft spot for them. Kaiser Chiefs, Employment was huge that year. Not remembering all these, reading them off the internet.
No, it's post-traumatic stress kicking in here, like when you're mentioning some of these names. But yeah, there's some great stuff on there, and there's bits on there that kind of like they remind me of like bands that were going around at the time that were a bit more underground. Like sort of some of the Kling Klang spin-off bands like Part Chimp and Mugstar. They were decent stuff, and I think that fits in more with that kind of thing than like what was commercial at the time and what was selling. Because somehow everybody went deaf. I don't know how it happened, but it just did.
Aye. It was quite a time, wasn't it? Post Nirvana, post Oasis, a little bit of a wasteland, maybe. But this had its charms for sure. And here's what Ezra had to say. Fall heads roll. Absence of showbiz reveals a rock roots return for the group. A strong contenders for one of the most gloriously terrible album covers ever. At least it telegraphs the strong presence of rock to the onlooker. Musically, it's a potent two-fister coupled with previous, a great set, and the presence of one of the last truly excellent fall epics in the shape of the monstrous blindness. It was obvious to all that the only way from here was up, and here and in the Fall would go on to carve a late period triptych for the ages. I'm guessing he's not referring to next record. But what does Pip think Fall Heads Roll?
So I think out of the 4 albums, this is the one that I've kind of struggled with the most in terms of thinking of some clever to say about it, really. It was slightly more interested than the sentiment that I think we're all going to say, which is this is kind of where the pubby rock really starts to manifest itself, and perhaps more in the second part of this album rather than the first part. Like you said, it has got its charms. I think Midnight in Aspen is one of the most beautiful songs that the Fall ever recorded. I think it's up there with anything else that is, Iceland and stuff like that. I think it's tender and it's meaningful in a way that isn't kind of he doesn't stick the room up with nostalgia or any kind of sentimentality, but it is genuinely kind of heartfelt and beautiful. And I think the first half of the album is surprisingly strong, even though I'm not going to be like overly gushy about this album. I think that it's got some great tunes in it. I really like Pacifying Joint. I know we did it a few weeks ago, didn't we? But that's kind of won its place in my heart, really, as just a fun song, I guess. And there's a lot of fun songs on it. Ride Away always makes me laugh, just because it's so weird. There is a thing about the first Fall track on an album is not what anybody else picks to be the first track on the album. This is another one of them, isn't it? Like I was saying about being a loco man, it's again in that trend. But it's wonderful in its very bizarre, quirky kind of way. It is actually a great tune and is a complete blind in terms of the way that the album actually goes, because it isn't angular and bizarre as an album. It's fairly straightforward, really. Even Midnight in Aspen is a straightforward song. It's beautiful, but it's there's nothing complicated going on with it. But do you know what it is for me? I think when it hits a shoe, that's when you can hear Reformation TLC actually being born. It happens before that album, but that's the song that it happens on, because I can't hear a shoe. I have the same instant thought every time I hear it, which is this off Reformation TLC?
Yeah, it's Systematic Abuse Take One, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, it is. And there's the second half of the album I think is limping a little bit, but it's got a good. I think Early Days of Channel Fury is a good song, and it's not. There's nothing that would make me switch the album off. But I'm not coming back to this album a whole lot, to be totally honest with you. It's one of them where I would pick a few tracks off it, but it's not an album that I listen to.
No, and I think like the meaty poppy stuff kind of steps up. It's missing the light deft touch of the last album, which is interesting. Although Jim Watts did have a lot of hand in kind of writing and production, I think, of Country on the Click, which he's not on this album. So I wonder whether but then again, he was in Are You a Missing Winner? So all bets are off. What happened? And it's like you look at the album, and I guess Sublingual Tablets, the other one for me, is like, what happened? The album before it and the album after it are nothing special. They've got great tracks on it, but this one, that one just knocks it out. And the same with Country on the Click. It seems to be really popular with people who are kind of okay with like the indie rock, more straight ahead indie rock version of the Fall. It's definitely more populist, and I can see why. But yeah, Ride Away is a total misdirect. Midnight in Aspen is beautiful. Early Days of Channel Fury. The rest, though, Pacifying Joint, Blindness, Bodemic, even I Can Hear the Grass Grow, You Wanna Clasp Hands, they're all cut from very similar cloth. And at times it's like, is this the same song? Not really. They're different enough, but those 5 or 6 make up half of the record, and they're very.
You do. I totally agree with all that, and I think what I was saying a few weeks ago about that shift in the dynamic, where it feels more like songs to be played at a big festival, rather than the more standard Fall approach of crafting these weird sonic oddities. It seems much more around how do we get the crowd clapping, or what's the one that's going to make everyone run to the front of stage kind of tunes. But I mean, that's my ear. As with all these things, as we're finding with the questions that you're putting out on social media and asking people about what their takes are and that, it's like people come to, it's a broad church, isn't it? People come to the F.A.L.L.O.U.T.P.O.D.C.A.S.T kind of different things, and it's like, I know Invisible Stew's like massively into this either, isn't he? It's like one of his favourite bits. Yeah. But maybe it's just us carrying the scars of hearing too many pub rock bands.
It could be, but yeah, we threw out that question this week because is Reformation TLC the worst Fall album? And not even close, right? And amazingly, like several hundred people, like 250 people weighed in on it, and a good chunk of them were like, "No, it's Cerebral Caustic," which we agree with. Like, it's like, but got me thinking. Right, I'm talking about the next album now already, but I'll leave that when we get to it. It did get me thinking and reassessing.
What's the worst album? Is it Cerebral Caustic or Reformation TLC? That's the real question.
But there's a real question for me, because I had approached Cerebral Caustic liking it because the songs I knew I liked, and so I gave it a bit more of a break. I approached Reformation disliking it because the songs I heard first I disliked, and so Cerebral Caustic got a pass, and Reformation was having his work cut out. But now I think I've got a slightly more objective view on it. But still,
it's a lot of fun, isn't it? You know,
always the Discordianist, isn't he? It's all a scam. It's all a scam. This is probably the closest, Fallhead's Roll, probably the closest the Fall ever came to being a normal indie rock band. Surprisingly full and muscular for a band known for their scratchy and industrial post-punk sound. Doesn't really sound like them, just a little bit too healthy, not febrile and scabby. This sounds like Marky Smith moonlighting with some monster riffage outfit.
That's not too bad for a review, really. I think that's some very good points well made. Yeah, because, I mean, as you've kind of discussed, it is where that kind of later sound comes in, where it sounds like they're getting a little bit lazy, a bit kind of like pubby. But overall, it's not a bad LP.
Aye. How about this one for you, Pip? An unexpected return to form for the Fall, who haven't recorded anything good for 10 years. The Green album, where the theme seems to be recycling deliberately elements from previous Fall songs. What About Us appears to have the same tune as Pacifying Joint, and Bo-Demic echoes Middle Class Revolt's Hey Student, and Blindness has lyrics from Chicago Now of Extricate. Like that.
Oh, it's not too far off the mark. I think it's I would probably be slightly more charitable than this particular person about this album, but I do get where they're coming from. We've already said this is kind of where the order of the sewer pub rock is kind of make its whiffy presence known. I guess it is. I was thinking about the other review as well that you read, so I think I probably agree with that kind of type as well, that this is as close as you're going to get to like a normal album from the Fall, isn't it? Both with its heavy varnish production and slightly disappointing album fillers that are on here.
Yeah.
Which was the Extricate song that you were saying? The one off Extricate that sounded like Blindness.
It's not sounding like they're saying lyrics from Chicago Now, and I think we've mentioned that when we did the song. Let me just
yeah.
I'll just make a brew whilst you're doing that.
We'll drain some more kittens.
Bloody another one. Do you work hard? Doesn't he say do you work hard through Blindness as well as he says on Chicago Now? I think so. So I think that's the connection. But I wouldn't go as far as to say it's recycling.
But I made the point earlier that, What About Us and Pacifying Joint and a few others have riffs that are quite similar. And that is not to say that we dislike any of those. Same goes for Imperial Wax, where I think the pub stuff really kicks it. But none of it's bad. Well, that's not true. Some of it is bad. But most of it's not bad. What does
Some of it's forgivable.
Exactly. What does Tim think of this record?
Well, as we said before, this is one of his favourite periods, isn't it? So let's see what he's put. Right. Very fond of this one too, probably because it was the first I had the chance to buy on release. Hear the Peel session and see them live a couple times. Great band live. Some lovely meditative moments here, like Aspen and Channel Fury. I like the weirdness of some of the stompers too, like Assume, Bodemic, Past Pans, You Wanna. Sort of Unsettled. Blindness is the obvious highlight, and there's a monument. Live, it was phenomenal.
Indeed. So all in all, we quite like it, but not as much as the previous one. Now, basically, things once again went to shit in between this album and the next one.
Did we hear what else were there?
I think I started with. Let's have a look. He goes on about rock, and the cover of the album is showing about rock, but it was like half an hour ago at this point. So who knows what happens? So things went to shit again when in the middle of the American tour, Burt Whistle, Pritchard and Trafford ditched him. And this was about the era when he was Renegade just after this wrote somewhat liberal air quotes. Where he's banging on about Ben Pritchard and Spencer Burt Whistle in not a very nice light, and how great Reformation is all the way through the book.
Sorry, I've got to say this. It's like it's supposed to be a biography of like a 50-year-old bloke, and he starts off with like some Whippersnappers that pissed him off the week before.
Yeah,
it's just like a big rant.
Just totally as much as they might have annoyed him to dedicate the first 20 pages of your biography about to them is a bit harsh, because it's not long before that when it's not repetition, it's discipline, that documentary came out, and it's got that band is where they're talking, and they're all talking about how great it is and it's brilliant. And it's like 3 months later they sacked, and it's or they ditched him. So they ditch him in the middle of the tour. He gets hold of the band Dark on My Love, which has Tim Presley, Rob Barbato, and Orfeo McCord, basically a bunch of American indie kids, and he brings them on to be the new Fall, along with Dave the Eagle Spur, who shows up for some of it as well. But Presley has gone on since then to do some really good stuff as White Fence, and especially his drinks with his partner, Kate Le Bon, yeah. So let's have a bit of a listen to Reformation post TLC, if you don't mind.
Just the best ones.
Just the best ones.
I think it's over now. I think it's ending. I think it's over now. I think it's beginning. A 7-year cycle seems to happen every day. I walk up the hill and then descending every way. I think it's all descending everywhere.
Don't love you and I never did.
names did they have? Nobody knew. Was it Latin? Was it Yamaha? Nobody knew. The Promise. They portion to promise. They portion to promise. Tale of the usher. For me and the one who born him, and one for the one who threatened ye with no money. You veterans gay, puppy on TV.
So it's turning into the most contentious and interesting discussion, just because. All right, so I went back to it, listening to it again this week, and realized that I really quite like Reformation, the song, and Fall Sound. An insult song, Coach and Horses, The Usher, The Right Stuff, Das Boat, and I can even get on board with Systematic Abuse at this point. So I'm like, I like 60% of this album, which is more than quite a few other albums. So we got on and we put that poll out, and people were like, no. And the one that most people would say, they cited Levitate, which I'm not having at all. That's nonsense. But they also cited Cerebral Caustic, and as I was saying, I had a soft spot for Cerebral Caustic because I knew the joke on Life Just Bounces, which two songs I really
Bonkers
love.
and Phoenix.
I knew Bonkers and Phoenix a little bit, but I didn't. But Life Just Bounces is one of my favorite. And then we listened to it, and fair enough, that first half is hard going, but then I like the Aphid and Pine Leaves, which only gives me like 4 or 5 songs on Cerebral Caustic that I would go back to. So I'm like, all right, well then it's hard to say that Reformation is the worst album if I can enjoy most of it. And some of the other stuff is so bad, like Scenario. And that line, and descending every way, is so bad. It's been going through my head for the whole week. Descending every way. It just is the laziest, worst. It's like when kids write a poem and they're like, I put my iPhone in the car and then I said, ha, 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 ha. And it's like just the worst, laziest kind of line. It's like, but I just give him the benefit of the doubt. It's just this ridiculous. It's disgraceful, to be honest. So yeah, there's my 2 pence on Reformation post TLC. Pip, what about you?
Okay, so it's a weird one listening to it now, because when we first started the podcast, this was easily my least favourite album, without a shadow of a doubt, and I still enjoy disliking this album. But having sat through the full album several times this week, I think it's one of those things that happen. I get this when sometimes as an experiment I will try and learn a song that I don't like on the guitar or something, and in the process of learning that song you become familiar with it, and you become, it's bits may catch you as being clever in the first listen, and it sort of charms you, and you can get into it in a way that is that you just can't from just listening to it. And I think think pouring over the tracks on this album again and again and again, kind of in jokes and standing kind of repetitive punchlines, and how venomous we've been about systematic abuse over the weeks. So I've got a soft spot for this album now, in as much as they feel like people that I know from a pub. These songs, these are people that I recognise now. Even Scenario, I can kind of listen with a glint in my eye and a kind of humoured ear. And it's not as bad as we have made it out to be, this album. And you're probably right, on a statistical basis, it probably is more listenable than something like Caustic Sound Lost 7th Live or something like that. But at the same time, there is this kind of... there's not many Fall albums that don't feel like they've had any gigging before they've been put on record. And that's what this album sounds like. It sounds like an album that hasn't been gigged before they recorded it. And that's the bagginess that I think all of us object to as, sort of musicians and people who've performed and gigged, toured and all that kind of thing. It's like you get an ear for that type of dynamic on a record. And that's what is both where its charm comes from and the bits that amuse us, and it's also the bits that are a bit grating, really, because they're the kinds of rough edges that get knocked off from gigging, aren't they? That just playing the song live over and over again, you just tighten up certain bits that are just that are baggy and boring. It's just got quite a few baggy and boring bits that go on, like Systematic Abuse for 8 minutes, which is a bit unjustifiable. Das Boot, which we all really, really liked, is still a 10-minute slog, whichever way you cut it. But there are moments of genius, like The Usher, which we did a few weeks ago, didn't we? Which we all sort of cooed about and all saw that as being a really good one. And what was the other one coming to mind? Even stuff like Fall Sound and Over, it's kind of won me over. When I used to go, when I was on the Dole and had nowhere else to go, no money or anything, I used to hang around in a record shop on Wigan Market. Guy who was obsessed with the Beatles.
Steve, if you're listening.
Hey, Steve.
If you're listening, Steve, yeah. And he would listen to anything that was the Beatles. And not just listen to it, but like over and over again, like his bootleg. I remember Revolution Number 9 playing over and over again in the shop. And becoming familiar with those tracks, even though I hated them. And the familiarity comes something that you comfortable with, isn't it? And it's got a bit of that for me, this album now. It's a bit like a cut pair of slippers that don't look very nice. They are cool put on. So I can enjoy it in the comfort of my own home, but it's not one of those albums I'd be recommending.
No, and that Steve Stahl, where you would go by and he'd be playing like stuff that you can now get, like Get Back, 9 hours of them practicing songs. Yeah. That's why he was playing those tapes that were just hours of them just like doodling about to a half a song here. They're all 70 takes of She Loves You or whatever. So he got him off somebody. But yeah, you get to know the wrinkles of it. And one thing again with the poll this week, people kept pointing out that the stuff live was great. And you had got that last night, the Palace stuff. And this is a good band, and they do sound good live.
Yeah. I meant to say that, sorry, because I've been listening to Spotify this week, and on the extended version, there is like 2 albums worth of live stuff on the extended version of this. And it's great. It really is good, because I was comparing and contrasting old songs that the previous lineups had knocked out, and they knock them out the park. They're great. It would have been a good gig. And even the stuff, so going back to my kind of gigging point with the album, the stuff, once they've got out on the road and they're playing live, they take on a new bit of energy, don't they? So yeah, they are talented musicians, without a doubt.
Yeah. Let's have a look at what Ezra has to say. Well, first, I'll give you the info. So it was recorded 2006, came out early 2007. Again, Graceland's in Rochdale, Lisa Stansfield studio, and again out on Slogan. And the cover, we haven't talked too much about covers tonight. The English cover is this one, which is kind of a fake stained glass or mosaic kind of thing, right? Isn't it? So, and it's not terrible, but it's also not particularly awe-inspiring. But the one we've talked about is the American cover, which is the family photo.
This is for you,
I tell you
Phil.
what, when I used to work in social services, this family would definitely be getting a welfare check.
You got the brother on the side there, who's well behaved, and
He's doing all right for himself, isn't he? He's got his own car.
it descends down into this kind of gaggle in the middle, with Dave Spur in the background just glaring at you, and Smith as old Uncle Peter is just there for the afternoon.
He's not front and centre on that photograph though, which is unusual.
No, there's not a lot of fall covers with a band picture on it. Light User Syndrome comes to mind, and he's front and center there. And I think is he front and center on Curious Friends Experiment, where half of the band's covered by the letters of the title.
Do you reckon that's his best jumper? Do you reckon he's got his best jumper on?
Well, Elaine's been in the loop for a few years now, and she's dressing him nicely, and he's well presented, and she's God bless her. She was a force for good through this entire period. Here's what Ezra had to say about the TLC. He's always been a little bit more generous with it, I think, than we have. That's just his nature, isn't it?
Because he's young and idealistic.
Exactly. Oh, he somewhat confusingly sent me extra bits after the original section, so I'll see what I can do.
Reformation post-TLC, unless, of course, the only way was down. He thinks we're reading these back to back. So in his last message, like half an hour ago, he said the only way is up, if you remember. So now he's referring back to that. That's not how this works.
In Ezra's comments.
That's not how it works, Ezra. Reformation post-TLC, unless, of course, the only way was down, and down it was. So far down, it's actually an achievement of sorts, where the cover to Heads was charmingly cack. Where the cover to Heads was charmingly cack-handed, the cover to this was just cack, abject cack. Big Head and his wife should hang their heads. The first fall album that can be accurately described as lackluster. A few of these rockers could rub shoulders with the big boys like incels following a rugby team to Weatherspoons in the hope of skirt by association. It says all you need to know that the best track is an 11-minute long analog pagan rite composed with the intention of animating a stay-puffed man golem version of Malcolm Mooney. Divine intentions dashed by lack of ideas. So maybe not as kind as we initially thought. Alistair, what do you think of Reformation post-TLC?
Well, picking up on what Phil was saying about the sort of familiarity thing, I can kind of get that, because that's the way that commercial radio stations work. Play all the same shit all the time and everybody's happy. They're in the comfort zone. So yeah, that argument that definitely works, and I've kind of warmed to it a little bit as well. There's bits on it which you just go, yeah, it's all right. Bits on it, but most of it's a bit kind of like meh. I mean, the Usher's good, do like that. And Das Boot is absolutely fantastic. Once you get past the Roger Waters wanking off guitar bit, you're into like really, really nice territory. Sonically, it's fantastic. So they've got moments where they're really excelling on this LP, and then moments where it's just kind of a bit we'll move on to the next song. So it's a mixed bag.
It's a mixed bag.
I do think the guitar is the weak link on the album. We've been very harsh on. Well, no, we're not. We've just been very honest about Greenware and his contributions to the Fall stuff, and it's perhaps disappointing kind of tendency to fall in the rather dreary and a bit boring. And I think this has a similar kind of vibe. The guitar tends to fall into the predictable, cheesy, uninspired, wandering around aimlessly at times on tunes. It doesn't really hit the mark in a way. But it's interesting you're saying that Dave Spur kind of comes on board at this point, because I do think that one of the gleams of light perhaps on this album is a return to a bass heavy sound. I do see that happening on this album. Certainly is not talking about the next album yet, but that kind of comes through a lot more on the next album. So there's glimmers of hope here, even given all the kind of restraints they put on themselves in terms of what they had to produce.
And it's a landmark LP for
Landmine
me.
LP, you mean?
A landmark LP because
Skid mark LP.
It's the first LP LP, where you can hear whistles from Mark Smith's teeth. Yeah, over a bit of a scissors, sausages kind of thing going on.
So Greenway does show up on a few, and it's interesting. So Barbato and Spur are both credited with bass all the way through. So is this a 2-bass lineup, the only 2-bass lineup of the Fall, or did they just trade songs? It's unclear. I can't really hear evidence of 2 bass lines going on.
I had noticed it.
No, and so Straight on Cafe had 2 basses for a time, and it's a very difficult thing to pull off.
Yeah,
it's much easier for them to kind of just be doubling up on each other. Like with drums, I think it's easier to kind of find different spaces to play in. Whereas if you've got something melodic going on that can as well, it's more restrictive. I didn't hear 2 basses on this.
No. Smitty used to be a fan of Evil Blizzard. He had them spotting them quite a few times. They got like 3 basses.
Right.
That's just showing off.
What does Tim think of this record, dare I ask?
I'll tell you right away. He's put great live band, terrible album. I really dislike the production sound, sort of cavernous. He's right, actually, about that. The production's a bit sort of cavernous in a 60s-ish kind of way, but it deadens all the impact. Songwriting feels half-baked, and the reverb-drenched vocals suck. Strangely, I didn't mind it at release, but I like it less every year.
Interesting, on a different journey from us, but he generally agrees with the consensus that, and yeah, we've said before, and as I spend more time with it, giving them a little bit more, empathizing a little bit more with the pain of the post-TLC band of like, you're in the middle of a tour, you come on board, you kind of scratch together some Fall-ish sounding stuff and don't do a terrible job of putting them together, and then you have to lay them down and record them in Rochdale of all places.
Oh, given that though, there's a lot more obvious attempts at trying to do slightly more avant-garde pieces on this than either of the 2 albums we've just been talking about.
Okay.
It's Das Boot and Usher and things like that. They are being genuinely more creative in the songwriting and more adventurous in the studio, but the end product tends to be a lot more pedestrian for some reason.
Very nice.
Yeah, the highlights of it, the ones that are a bit mad.
Yeah, the right stuff, which we've not talked about yet, with which has Elaine sync, is actually pretty delightful. And yeah, the weirder ones like Das Boot, the Usher, even Coaching Horses, which I liked and stuff. So yes, maybe it's prime to wait. Maybe that'll be the story of this podcast. The final's made up of entirely of songs from Reformation.
The redemption arc. The final is the insult song versus the Usher.
Exactly. Well, he went out, didn't he? The Usher, so spoiler.
I've called it then.
We've all been on a journey down the road to Domestos, I think.
Exactly. How about this review, though, Philip? You've got to go back to the late 80s to hear a Fall record with this kind of punch. A fine garage rock album. The rhythm section sounds like a roots reggae dub album. It's like Lee. It's like
say it again. Say that out loud again.
The rhythm section sounds like a roots reggae dub album. It's like Lee Perry producing The Fall. Smith is clearly invigorated by the recent upheaval, snapping and snarling away, his guts overflowing with bile. The material here is as good as that which graced recent Fall albums such as Heads Roll and Country on the Click. The floor is yours, Philip.
Wow. Fuck me, there's some mental people out there, isn't there? I mean, it's like, oh yeah, now they've said it out loud, I can really hear the roots dub and reggae feel to this album. I just don't realise.
Well, hold on, he's put something on the bottom. He's put something. Hold on. I was listening to a mangled version of Bob Marley's Legend. I take that back.
I tell you what, actually, where I will find common ground with that is, I do think the drum and bass on it is decent, and there's nothing embarrassing from a drum and bass point of view on it. I mean, some of it's a bit dull, a bit jammy, but there's nothing embarrassing on it. The production's perhaps a bit uninventive, but like I said before, for me, it's the guitar that's the weak link on this album, so I wouldn't have anything negative to say about the rhythm section on it. So maybe that, to be charitable, maybe that's what they got.
Paul's dub album. All right, let's do it about this one. The
They're the
most
same people who put Levitate into the worst album bag, aren't they?
I think so. I've not written down the names of these people. And to be honest, I've mashed together several reviews to get us the most interesting bits. Let's pull back the curtain. What about this one, Al? One of the more accessible Fall albums, plenty of grooves and even some catchy melodies. Mark sings well, extremely consistent. The best Fall album since The Unutterable. Seems like Mez made the right decision to get rid of the TLC band. I wasn't impressed by the earlier album Heads Roll, but there's nothing here that's as bad as that generic garage rock on that album. It's krauty, adventurous, and experimental. Reminds me of the Friends experiment. Best of all, the sound of this album is a delight for my ears. Loves the production, thinks it's the best album since The Unutterable. Accessible, much krauty and adventurous and experimental, unlike Boo Heads Roll. Come on, Al.
Well, there's, elements of truth in there, but I think they kind of not seeing the big picture, really. Saying it's the best LP since Heads Roll.
Since Unutterable.
Unutterable, sorry. That's a bit kind of... Well, if you're going to come out with a statement like that, you need to listen to the bloody LP so you don't make yourself look daft in print.
Well said.
Do your research.
Well said. So let's leave behind TLC and have a listen to an interview before we move on.
Ben Pritchard is on guitar, and Eleni Pillow, that's my wife.
It's like you forgot her name at one point there, right? Well, let's have a listen.
Don't like to socialise with them.
How do you actually write your songs? Obviously, you write the words. When it comes to the music, how do you actually put these songs together? Do you play the guitar, for instance?
I used to, but I gave it up when I used to play the piano as well, but I stopped. Because I'm sort of very in the atonal, I sort of dislearnt a lot of things.
So the actual the structures of your songs, where do they come from then?
I do the structures. I whistle and things like that into a tape recorder and play at the group. But that's only 50% of the work. The other 50% is tunes that are put forward by the group. And so which is very interesting. See, if they're not Fall fans, they're not going to give me a... I mean, you wouldn't believe the rubbish I get, get sub Pink Floyd, Eric Clapton stuff from them, the young kids. That's surprising.
Yeah.
So that is how I heard he works, right? He'll go and he'll say, have you got any songs? So I remember Brammer talking says, Matt, and you come back in the band, you got any songs? And I'd go down the pub with he was talking about going around the pub with Spencer Birtwistle and saying, have you got any songs for me? And he'll buy songs. I bring people in the band and say, you've got to turn up with 3 or 4 songs every time. And then, might give them a little bit of a tape or an idea to kind of play along with. It's an interesting way to compose. He never went down that path of starting to compose stuff himself.
Orchestras. That would have been the standard move, wouldn't it? We're going to get an orchestra into the studio and we'll put some strings on that.
Yeah, flirt with brass and later rue it. Let's move on, shall we, to the last album that we're looking at this evening, which is Imperial Wax Solvent, which is the first group with the lads on it. That would be Peter Greenway, Dave the Eagle Spur, Kieran Mellon, and of course Eleni and Smith are still there. So let's have a bit of a listen to some of that.
And the waves through the slits in San Rocco. I'm a 50-year-old man. What are you gonna do about No shard up, no yard up. Slowly cooking. Catch up. Change back. Go around the town. Governor Leipzig. Here I like to relax. With tobacco and sugar, the people talk. Neighbors asleep again on the base. They're never in, they're always out. Proved diversible to the authorities. They knew Judy was his friend. Doc was his mom, but they still went on, searching and searching, with no result. I was provoked. It was not in accord with any known law. Laughing in the middle. 58 Driver B released all beyond where more gas and food is coming from.
So Imperial Wax Solvent recorded once again, mostly in Gracieland studio. It released 2008 on Sanctuary label, produced by Showbiz and Smith, but Andy Tomer of Mouse on Mars was around there as well, but it's not super clear what he did other than on maybe the Tower Rig song, which I think he had a big hand in. Yeah, this is the group that basically stayed around for 6 albums, so this is our penultimate set of albums. The next one we do will be the last 5 that will take us right up until the end. Yeah, it's the first time they haven't managed to get an album in a year, which basically means they spent a lot more time on it, I think, which is a good sign, and it's really clear that the tracks had been worked over a lot more the previous batch. What does Pip think of this album?
Well, it's leaps and bounds better than the previous album. You can really tell that there's a lot more time been invested in it. It's not got any of the bagginess that the previous album has. There is much like the first album that we started with, Country Click. There is a lot of strong songwriting going on in this album. There is. We were all grinning away. There was we were playing tracks off it. It was hard to perhaps pick the weaker tracks on this one, just because it's a much more consistent album. Got some classics on it, Latchkey Kid, Senior, Twilight Stock Replacer, things like that are very singable, very join-inable, catchy tunes. The band is tight and well rehearsed, but it's also where you start to feel a bit of a trade-off, isn't it, between the exciting, dangerous, unexpected, all starts to become a lot more processed, Pro Tools, neat colouring within the lines kind of stuff. And you start to also get this weird juxtaposition between Smithy becoming a more experimentalist vocalist, but the band itself just becoming a very tight backwash for some of that stuff to go on. This is the kind of birth of some of those cheesier riffs that are starting to find their way in, the well-recorded, the well-played performances, loads of energy. You know, it's like you hard push to say anything wrong with it. In fact, they're just a little bit less inventive than they would have been in any previous lineup. And I think that's the only criticism of it, really. A bit too safe musically, a bit too tame musically. But a great album, and definitely one of those that you would give somebody a first listen. But I think with this particular lineup, I think this is probably their best showing, just because of that trade-off that starts to happen, I think, between the music getting a bit safer and Mez getting more interesting as a vocalist, for my money.
Yeah, I think Sublingual Tablet is better with even with the same lineup. This is definitely the next one for me in that batch. Here's what Ezra had to say about this one.
Imperial wax solvent. After snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, they only go around and turn it around again. Victory is snatched back and snatched from defeat. Bloody freaking rock and roll or what, mate? This one comfortably wins prizes for the best title and cover from this batch. Great image of blue-headed Smith with rabbit eyes chundering green bile into the eyes of the listener. The Alchemidabulous title and image sucking together the stained glass jam fracture of TLC and waxing it pubulous purite rock to an immaculate sheen. Another late period throbber with the silver fox fuckery of 50-Year-Old Man, a song that all men should be legally obliged to sing at least once in the course of their 50th spin on the globe.
What was his opening line on that then?
Snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, they only go around and turn it around again. Victory is back and snatched from defeat.
So Invisible Timothy Twa starts off with great record almost sabotaged by perversity.
Interesting.
I'll read this now. Why is a bunch of it in a bad mono? Why is Strange Town even shitter than I expect it to be? The highlights are like RNFLP, the slightly off-kilter stuff. In this era, I think there were a bunch of live-based numbers which are great in a gig. Stuff like Wolf Kidult's 50-Year-Old Man, Tommy Shooter, but in the cold light of day have less impact. When I'm at home with the headphones on, give me Alton Towers and the Queasy Wobble, Can Summers, disco-ish feel, Torix, Tout Electro, Exploding Chimneys, sub-bass throb, and scuzzy guitar fill. The highs are very high here, in my opinion. This is also the start of the last lineup, right? Oddly doesn't sound like it to me. Sounds more akin to the FHR group than the group on the next album onwards. I see this album as the end of something rather than the beginning of what happens next.
I'll give him that. It's a transitional album. And Alton Towers, which I really like, is another misdirect because it is wonky in a way that the rest of the album is not. And I think I throw the same criticism as Heads Roll, in which that the songs are actually decent. They're well recorded. But that whiff of the pub in Kidult Man, 50-Year-Old Man, even Strange Town, Tommy Shooter, Senior Twilight, it's just too.
Yeah, one of the obvious ones.
All of it just doesn't do it for me, and I do again like the weirder ones. I'll take Torig, and I've been duped to Alton Towers, and yeah, bits of like the stuff like Smithy's voice on Latchkey Kid and nonsense like that. So it is a strong album, but again, what I'm learning is if only I was able to listen to one record, I'd pick Reformation over this to listen to. Because there's more songs on it that I would, the weird ones that I like. If you watch that In the Basement that they did with Nigel Godrich, there was that's a good, decent recording of these live, and they do sound good and muscular, and it does work. And so it's in there. It's just it's totally about me and my taste. That it's like I don't need to listen to Wolf Kidult Man and 50-Year-Old Man 5 more times. I've heard enough. They're not. I don't think they're giving me anything new. What is amazing is that Smith was only 50 at this point. I'm 48. Smith was 50 at this point in the Falls journey. Jeez Louise. What does Alistair think of Imperial Wax Solvent?
I mean, it's got its highlights, definitely, as you've said, and it is again the more odd stuff, the more creative stuff that I appreciate more stuff. This LP, there's times when it is a little bit tame, but there's a lot of bonuses, a lot of plus points that you can pull from it. I think it's where you start getting the more growly vocal delivery going on. Like you said, with experimenting a little bit more with the voice, and Elaine kind of like getting a foot in for. Yeah, I think you can hear, you can see a footprint there on this LP. But yeah, it's a funny LP. There's nice odd bits to it. It does make me laugh. Then the recording's not bad either. There's bits where it's in the red, so that's always going to appeal to me. But all in all, it's okay. It's not shit.
It's not a shit, and it's the 26th album this band had put out. Who else's 26th album is?
It's the 26th studio album.
26 albums. You do that kind of thing in an afternoon.
Well, I do, but I don't have the quality of things like Reformation plus DLC.
I actually agree with you.
Very good. How about this? How about this review? As a full-blooded, I'll throw this one to filth. As a full-blooded Fall devotee, I can't help but feel that Reformation was the better album, with more visionary lunacy, both long and short form. This is what a thoroughfare maybe feels like. It's accessible, it's crowd-pleasing. Sounds like, hey, I'll take that. Mark is very nearly cogent most of the time and sounds like he's having fun, but it's a kind of sort of innocuous, harmless fun that wouldn't result in you getting your teeth kicked in if you looked at him sideways. He even does funny voices like accents and shit. Yeah, what do you make about that?
I probably agree with that, to be honest with you. I think that's the first summing up, really. It is accessible and it is a fun album to listen to.
Oh, what do you reckon to I'll throw a review your way and you can tell me what you think. Generally boring, too long, 50-year-old man, 11 minutes, repetitive and already done by the Fall 10 times. The poor sound does not help. In fact, there's two wonderful songs on this album. They're the ones that Smith doesn't sing on. That is I've Been Duped and Towering. Everything else, not so much.
I think they're missing the point a little bit again there. Makes you wonder if they just like listen to it once and then, first impressions were that, it's multifaceted, this LP. I think the previous review got a little bit better, a bit more right than this chap or chapess has done. With the humour that's in it, because it is funny LP at times. There's the bits about like Tommy Shooter, Knees to Noodles, and the daft voices. So very entertaining to me, but I am a very childish individual, as you all know.
Very good indeed. Well, that kind of brings us more or less to the end. I'm going to play a few short clips at the end. The first one, I'm going to play bits of the time he met Frank Skinner in the pub when he interviewed him.
Hello, Stuart.
Yeah.
Might do some of that.
I think you should say that.
Yeah. Chapter 15, when they run out of stuff to say.
Put me in, Mark.
That's right, yeah. It's always nice to meet famous comedians like Frank Skinner.
There you go, there's your opening line. I'm very excited about meeting you.
Reflecting on
my
life.
Reflecting
on my life, yeah.
I was quite worried about meeting you there,
Now I will hang myself.
I love you, Mark. I love you. You changed my life.
Well, good. I don't know.
I'm telling you.
Well, good. I'm saying in myself.
Right.
I'm a big Fall fan like you are.
Are you really?
Yeah, I'm a big Fall fan.
Brilliant. Shall we just talk about the Fall and how good they are?
Yeah.
He has shown that there is a way of...
So, he meets Frank Skinner, right? And Frank disarms him by telling him he loves him. He changed my life, Mark. And he goes all quiet, doesn't he? And sappy. And he says, oh, well, that's good. I like that. And Frank was talking about it on Adam Buxton. We got Adam Buxton podcast, and they're both Fall fans, and they're talking about like how nervous he was meeting Mark because he was a huge Fall fan. And like when he told him he loved him and he changed his life, and he said that was after that. He just totally disarmed him, and he turned into this like he didn't know what to say.
He did better than Adam Buxton did when they had him on Final Justice on the Adam and Josh show.
Oh, yeah. There's a bit where Buxton's this clip where he talks about that, and he talks about going there. And that wasn't Smith's house, that was Buxton's apartment that they had to do it in. And Smith was very demanding, and Buxton was like, they were on the edge the whole day. And, there's a list of demands, and it's very funny if you can find that clip of Adam Buxton talking about the Final Justice thing. They didn't think they'd get him. They made like a wish list of people they wanted, and they just didn't believe for a second Smith would agree to do it, but he did, and it was very funny. But there's also that clip where on the Frank Skinner with Baddiel, where they do, I think, How I Wrote Elastic Man, the Baddiel's playing it on the guitar. And,
I don't think I've seen it.
Yeah. I'm going to finish up for real with actually, no, I'm going to save that clip, Boy Is Jesus, for the Christmas special. Makes more sense, doesn't it? So
That's it. Got anything to say about those four beautiful albums? Imperial, Wax, Solvent, Reformation, Post-TLC, Heads Roll, and Country on the Click.
I've enjoyed it more than I thought I would.
No, it was interesting, and it is, again, Pete himself, but it's the stranger stuff that's really standing out to me, like with this era. They did some stuff that's very samey, has been pointed out in some of the reviews, but when they start getting odd, they do it well.
Yeah, every album's got about 50-60% of chuggy and pub rockers, and like a good solid chunk of experimental or weirder stuff on every album, enough to keep you interested and enough just to keep your toe tapping as well, if that's what you're out there for. It's a solid run of albums, Reformation maybe being the blip in there. And I made the case that it's one story. Basically, once Hanley's gone, just before Marshall's Suite, they had a couple of albums where they were scratching around. And then once Country on the Click hit right to the end, with the exception of Reformation, it's one solid kind of story of the Fall Mark II in my mind.
Yeah, they sort of get in the lane and they know where they're going now, don't they? It just powers along.
Yeah, and so what that means is the next next special that we do at the end of the next set of episodes will feature Your Future Our Clutter, Ersatz GB, Remit, Sublingual Tablet, and New Facts Emerge, and then we've done it. We've talked about the whole bloody bag. So have a rest before we get round to that one. And next week, if all goes according to plan, we'll have a fun Christmas extravaganza. Are we still up for that?
Christmas show, yeah.
Alrighty, take it easy, my friends.
Fabulous.
And, see you later.
See you soon, man. Cheers.